Nietzsche, the man who vibe-checked God. Where's the popular ones here? Nietzsche, the man who vibe-checked God. I'm kind of interested.
In 1882, a sickly German man penned these words: "God is dead, God remains dead, and we have killed him. How shall we comfort ourselves, the murderers of all murderers?" This is perhaps Nietzsche's best-known contribution to popular culture, though his name has also been used by Nazis, motivational speakers, and edgy teenagers who think that he was a proponent of nihilism for some reason. Nietzsche is as famous as he's misinterpreted, and because of this, it's only natural to provide this, although still embarrassingly reductive guide to the life and philosophy of the man behind the mustache. Nietzsche was born in Prussia on October 15th, 1844, the exact same day in which King Frederick Wilhelm of Prussia was celebrating his 49th birthday, hence Nietzsche's first name. At school, Nietzsche excelled in Christian theology and created Germania, a music and literature club. He also learned Greek, Latin, Hebrew, and French in order to read the primary sources of his studies.
Crazy.
Nietzsche soon became obsessed with Friedrich Hölderlin, a long-dead obscure poet who suffered from schizophrenia and lived in a tower for 36 years straight, writing poetry about the simple things.
What a fucking life, dude. That guy would be a Twitch chatter today. Isn't that crazy? And his poetry would be copy pasta.
And playing the piano. Like most artists, people only liked his work after his death. He also became friends with another poet.
How many of you are locked in a tower right now that you haven't left for decades? How many of you are at the top of a tall tower that you've been locked into? I'm literally Rapunzel.
And raging drunk Ernst Ortlieb, who would introduce him to the music of Wagner and introduce himself to an early death due to alcoholism. Mr. Ortlieb was found in a ditch a mere few weeks after meeting the young Nietzsche. Nietzsche studied theology and classic philology at the University of Bonn, and after only one semester, completely lost his faith. After reading Feuerbach's The Essence of Christianity, as well as his increasing admiration for the pessimistic Schopenhauer, Nietzsche found himself on the edge of nihilism. Impressively, Nietzsche was later...
So he's a college freshman atheist Redditor at this point in his life. At this point in his life, he's a college freshman atheist Redditor, and he's going to change the world.
Offered the chair of philology at Basel at the young age of 24, and is still actually on record as the youngest tenured classics professor. Notably, before he moved to Basel, Nietzsche renounced his Prussian citizenship. He would remain entirely stateless for the remainder of his life. During this time, Nietzsche also served during the Franco-Prussian War. Scholars believe that his frequent visits to the brothels likely led to him contracting syphilis.
That'll do it.
Nietzsche then met Richard Wagner in 1868 and soon developed an absolute man-crush, due largely to their shared interest in music and Schopenhauer.
God, what a hairstyle.
However, Wagner became a little too mainstream for Nietzsche later on, championing German culture in his music with an indulgence that sickened him, so he broke their friendship. Nietzsche was also suffering from poor health at this point. He was nearly blind, had terrible migraines, violent indigestion, broken bones from horse riding, and carried various diseases. Due to this...
I'm not religious, but I could see how someone who was formerly religious would have all this and then say that God is dead. You get dealt this many bad cards, you must be like, there's not a big man upstairs looking out for me.
In 1879. Nietzsche's years of independence were very productive and sound quite nice, really. Living off of his pensions, he would travel to Switzerland in the summer and to Italy and France in the winters.
While this makes it seem like Nietzsche led a pretty comfortable life, he remained largely unrecognized throughout his lifetime and consequently led a pretty modest lifestyle. However, since his death, it is estimated that his works have generated between $400 and $600 million through his academic writing, book sales, and the use of his name and likeness in entertainment.
He would begin with Human All Too Human in 1878, and would create a major work each year until 1888.
That's crazy.
He also met the love of his life, Lou Salome. In fact, he liked her so much he proposed to her 3 times. Although Nietzsche never did get a yes, nor really any non-platonic affection, he did stick around, and both he, Salome, and his best friend Paul Ray would tour the countryside looking to set up a commune.
No wonder. El Riz?
Unfortunately, this would never come to fruition. Nietzsche was a...
Dude, he's on LiveJournal right now. God is freaking dead. fuck my Chungus life, God is dead.
Eventually abandoned by his friends when his admiration for Salome became far too much to bear. After this, he became hooked on opium and lived in isolation in the mountains,
Yikes.
writing Thus Spoke Zarathustra in 10 days. These were very sad and lonely times for Nietzsche. His books weren't selling, and he was unable to obtain a job at a university. Meanwhile, his sister traveled to Paraguay with her anti-Semitic husband and attempted to establish a new Germany. Nietzsche thought this was very stupid.
Yeah.
In the midst of this dark time, Nietzsche found the strength to publish many of his books on his own dime, and he even saw his health improve. However, on January 3rd, Nietzsche reportedly witnessed a horse being flogged at a street corner in Turin, ran to the horse, threw his arms around its neck to protect it, and then collapsed. This moment, although not entirely proven to be something that actually happened, generally marks Nietzsche's gradual decline into madness.
Okay.
He would begin to write letters signed as the Crucified One or Dionysus, and would command the German emperor to go to Rome to be shot.
Okay.
Sadly, after 2 strokes and pneumonia, as well as a plethora of mental issues and disease, Nietzsche passed away in 1900, almost entirely obscure, with very few friends and a sister who would change his life's work to reflect her own agenda.
What?
You're probably wondering what sort of philosophy could emerge from a guy who lived such an eccentric and depressing life such as Nietzsche.
I didn't know he was
one of
totally
his
unknown
greatest
during his life.
contributions is his persistent skepticism. Not only did Nietzsche criticize religion and attack previous philosophies, no, his critique launched an attack on the very central aspects of morality, down to the seemingly universal values of good and bad. In Nietzsche's time, morality was no longer attached to religion, but instead was considered to arise from rational thinking and reasoning.
Okay.
However, Nietzsche criticized this view, arguing that such rational morals were still deeply entangled with religion and historical
I
continuity.
guess who are the thinkers of... It just feels like this guy, everything he said would seem so just normal online behavior, just like angry guy online.
Contingencies. In fact, in the Genealogy of Morality, Nietzsche provides 3 treatises devoted to examining the evolution of central moral ideas. Nietzsche argues that our modern form of good versus bad actually happened due to an ancient slave revolt in morality. The masters or elites believed that they were good due to their nobility or exclusive virtues that could only be obtained by those in certain elite classes, such as courage in an elite military class. The slaves were powerless and unable to be good, and so came to resent their oppressor. In order to reclaim power, the slaves devalued everything their masters had, and that they could not have, and therefore vilified their oppressor, claiming them to be evil, making the humble lives of the slaves good. The slaves would argue that the causes behind the master's power are evil and that humility is voluntary rather than something the slaves were forced into. Nietzsche writes, "Our morality amounts to a vindictive effort to poison the happiness of the fortunate, instead of a high-minded, dispassionate, and strictly rational concern for others." Hence, Christianity and democracy for Nietzsche are little more than universal extensions of slave morality due to their obsession with freedom and equality. Notably, his reading of morality doesn't make our idea of good versus evil sound all that rational. Instead, democracy is simply seen as the child of Christianity, according to Nietzsche, by which that is just an extension of slave morality, a morality based upon the erosion of power through jealously taking down the powerful. Here, the rise in European materialism, the popularity of secularism, and the advancement of the sciences, including the theory of evolution, led to Nietzsche's harrowing conclusion. Because the belief in the Christian God has become unbelievable, everything that was built upon this faith, propped up by it, grown into it, including the whole of our European morality, is destined for collapse. God's death then welcomes an era without values. Everything that was thought to be sacred and eternal is now seen merely mortal and arbitrary. Nietzsche believed that the death of God will lead to the loss of a universal perspective and truth, and subsequently, nihilism.
I see.
Most people focus on this aspect of Nietzsche's argument, claiming that he is a nihilist or advocate of nihilism. However, here is what he has to say about nihilists. A nihilist is a man who judges that the real world ought not to be, and that the world as it ought to be does not exist. According to this view, our existence, action, suffering, willing, feeling, has no meaning. This, in vain, is the nihilist's pathos, an inconsistency on the part of the nihilists. This inconsistency is the fact that the nihilist is still willing or wishing or valuing something, even if that something is nothingness. Beyond this error, Nietzsche also doesn't really think this nothingness is something.
Just tuned in, don't know what's happening. All I know is Atrioc is putting them liberals in their place. I'm having a live debate with a well-known liberal, Nietzsche, He's talking a lot of shit about God. But you know who fucking makes the sun rise in the morning? God. Checkmate.
Something worthwhile. For him, what makes the human species amazing is not what we believe in or value, but that we can value to begin with. Nihilism is the greatest crisis we face, and hence requires the greatest of values to recover from. But wait, what about the whole pleasure versus pain system as a basis for morality? In The Last Man, Nietzsche imagines the utilitarian man. The utilitarian man spends his days maximizing pleasures and minimizing pain, something that we can now probably call the modern lifestyle.
Right, smoking
However,
weed,
Nietzsche
playing
points
PS5.
to the fact that pain is usually required if one is to do anything worthwhile. He believes we'll suffer either way in life. We can either let life make us suffer, or we can make our suffering, channeling it into something we find purpose in.
Okay.
For him, the hedonistic man is a pathetic man who is simply content and nothing more. Sure, it's a solution to nihilism, but not one that Nietzsche is really all that a fan of.
Okay.
Here is Nietzsche's solution to nihilism, the Übermensch, or Overman. He believes that the Overman will be the next stage in evolution and will be the creator of new values that we cannot even imagine. The Overman shall be the meaning of the earth. Man is a rope tied between beast and
This is Twitch chatter shit. It's like I'm so sad about scrolling TikTok and smoking weed and I feel depressed. I want to be a Giga Chad. This is just lonely Twitch chatter worldview.
Overman, a rope over an abyss. What is great in man is that he is a bridge and not an end.
He would be looks maxing.
Now, this is kind of extreme and not entirely useful for those who are suffering from hopelessness and nihilism. How can you deal with life suffering now without relying on...
Do you guys think Nietzsche would be a good VTuber? With a voice changer. Like a higher pitched ayaya type voice changer.
Becoming the next stage in human evolution. Nietzsche, who personally struggled with depression and nihilism, had much to say about living life to the fullest, even in the face of meaninglessness. Firstly, he suggested to love our fate.
Nietzsche.
He writes, I want to learn more and more to see as beautiful what is necessary in things. Then I shall be one of those who makes things beautiful. Amor fati. Let that be my love henceforth.
Don't call me a fatty, all right? Just because I had a big meal. I want to watch a video about... I want to watch a video about something